All right. So I'm here for part two. Thanks again. I know we thought we had our kinks worked out, but I guess it wasn't in the cards this time. So, anyways, I'm Elizabeth. I am one of our other breastfeeding peer counselors, and I represent the focus community of Indigenous people, so specifically AI, AN, American Indian, Alaskan Native. So my focus community, I'm going to back up. So the reason that this program has focus communities, so we have three different breastfeeding peer counselors, myself representing the Indigenous, American Indian, Alaskan Native focus community. Mary represents the Pacific Islander community, and Siobhan represents the Black and African American community. And the reason that we have these communities or these focus communities for our program is that, what we've discovered is that our specific communities have significant barriers to care and have had a lot of challenges accessing breastfeeding support for many, many different reasons. And a large part of that, like Mary was talking about, is the way that colonization has affected our communities. And we've been really, these traditions have been taken from us. And we also know that breastfeeding is one of the best things we can do for our babies, physically as well as emotionally. And really what we're talking about today too is that reclaiming of that sovereignty of that practice together, and taking that back in a way that is it's more than just how we're feeding our babies, which is important, but it's also it's reconnecting with our ancestors and with our descendants, and bringing all of these traditions back. I know in my community, what I learned is that our practices, our traditional practices, were actually illegal in this country until the late 70s. So for me, what breastfeeding is actually a revolution. It's saying, you know what, I get to connect with my culture and with my heritage, and I get to do these things. My grandmother was taken from her family when she was a baby, and so she didn't get to know her aunties. She didn't get to know her family, and all of our traditions were taken from her. And so now here I am. I get to decide how to do that, how to find these things again, how to find my people, how to find and not let these traditions die. So breastfeeding was a huge part of that. And hi everyone, by the way. I just kind of like, oh, here, let me see if I can add Mary. Mary, you still don't have you don't have a video camera by you. I don't know why. I'd love to have a side by side like we did in our practice. So anyways, my story is that with my first baby, I was in a very sort of mainstream, I'll say it, capitalist mindset, of really just like, my goal was getting my body back, bouncing back, not even just my body, but my life and my, my goal was like, oh yeah, I'm having a baby, but that doesn't mean that anything's changing, and I'm just going to be the same person with a baby. And I didn't provide space for myself and the growth and the grief that comes with having a baby, and the changes. We aren't the same person after having a baby. We're a completely new person. We're now a mother. We are, we have a part of us who is now walking the earth with us. So, but I hadn't really processed all of that. And I really was like, well, I can't just sit around and, oh my gosh, it sounds so, boring, just feeding a baby, and we had a lot of challenges physically and emotionally. So my daughter went back. She had to go back to Children's Hospital. She was born on a Thursday, and she was back. We were released from the hospital Sunday after she was born, and then she was back in Children's Hospital that afternoon after we got home 4 hours later. So we were also balancing a lot of medical stuff while trying to initiate breastfeeding, which I wanted to do because I was a whole food chef. And so I really was just looking at it from the food perspective, and I thought, well, this is, this is really cool. Like, this is the first whole food. But I didn't really look at it from any other angles. And then when she was about 3 years old, I went to this conference, and Cammie J. Goldhammer was speaking, and I love her so much. And she was talking about historical grief and breastfeeding and traditions, and she was talking about how it takes just 3 generations for a practice to be lost. And she was talking about how when she had her first baby laid on her chest, that she felt her ancestors speaking to her. And I thought about that was what was missing. That I wasn't even open. I wasn't even thinking about my ancestors. I wasn't thinking about my family or my culture or anything. I was thinking about the mechanics. And sure, we had some mechanical problems, but there was also bigger struggles. And from that moment on, I realized, and I was sitting at this table, right, with all these lactation professionals, and I started crying. And I was like, I need my ancestors. That's what I need. I need them to be with me for this. And that was when I started my journey of reconnecting. Because like Mary was talking about, so many of our, we've lost that because of colonization, and then we've also internalized so much shame about it. Like, why don't you know about these traditions? Well, how could I? My grandmother was taken away from her family and raised in a boarding school. She was told her family was dead. How is she supposed to learn? How is she supposed to pass it on to us? But that shame keeps us often from fighting. And so in that moment, listening to Cammie was what helped me get rid of that shame and start a journey. And then when I became pregnant with my second baby, my son, I knew I wanted to do it completely different. The goal was like not about staying the same. It was about growing and about connecting. And the actual mechanics of getting the milk into the baby was actually sort of a secondary side of it. And from the moment he was born, it was a completely different experience. There was this beautiful picture that was shared, and I'll share it on this page when we're done. Daybreak Star Doulas shared it the other day, and I shared it on my personal page. It was this gorgeous drawing from an artist, and I hope I say her name correctly, Wakia J. And it's this indigenous woman, and she's reaching up to the stars, and her eyes are closed, and she's giving birth. And it is this, she drew a picture of how I felt while I was giving birth to my baby. And my ancestors were there. And I reached up in the stars, and I found my baby, and it was so powerful. And they were there when I nursed him, and they were there as I took the time postpartum to cherish the things that were happening. And it was a ceremony. It wasn't logistics. It was a ceremony. And that's, to me, why this work is so important. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. I'm like fully crying. But that's I don't like, this is probably blasphemy. Like, I'm not here to make people breastfeed, and I'm not here, um, I understand that we have, a lot of times we have mechanical problems. Both my kids have tongue ties, and we needed to fix that to make the whole tab A slot B thing work out. But that's not the biggest part to me. The biggest part is finding those moments and finding that journey together of how do we sit in this bond and in this relationship and walk this path together, because I recognize that without the interruptions that particularly our focus communities have endured through colonization and capitalism, we had beautiful traditions. We had aunties who would help us. We just would have been in community of nursing our babies together, and sharing and supporting and co-nursing, and we and resting and recuperating. And instead, right now, what culture tells us, like what Mary was talking about, what TV tells us, is that there's only value if we're working, and instead of putting the value on our bodies and our healing and our relationships. And so for me, this work that we do in our communities is about supporting us together as we're healing and we're recuperating and we are meeting our babies and we are cultivating that relationship with them. And at the end of the day, yes, that milk is great. But if we're having, if in addition to the mechanical problems, like whatever, we can work those out. But we're also supporting, reclaiming the tradition of being with our babies in that way. And that is something that is invaluable, like to have that back. And so I'm just really honored and overjoyed to be doing this work and learning all the time. Like I get to meet and work with amazing people and learn more. In fact, I'm really excited. I'm starting a class next week with a woman named Rayanne Madison, the Postpartum Healing Lodge, and she also comes from Anishinaabe people, and so I'm really excited to learn more of the actual, medicine and ceremonies that come from our background. And then she's also Mexican, and I also have that background as well. So I'm pretty excited because she's a healer, a traditional healer, and I'm really excited to see how that all plays in together. So that's my story. Woo! Brought it real today. Would love, I see that we've got some folks watching. Would love if you guys, would type in some comments. If you have any, and it doesn't have to be necessarily cultural traditions either. I mean, I will say that, so my mom did nurse my younger brothers and sister, and seeing that was definitely helpful. And while I wouldn't say that was a cultural tradition, it kind of really just kind of made it normal. So to me, that was kind of my expectation. And I think when we expect something and we see it as normal, then that really is helpful. And just like Mary was saying, if we offer that, that's just such a beautiful gift we can give to our kiddos. When we say this is totally normal, let's do this, so it doesn't have to feel like this really difficult thing. It's something that we do together. My daughter breastfeeds her baby dolls, and it's so funny. There's a really cute picture of us nursing our babies together. She was sitting on the couch with an extra boppy pillow and nursing her baby doll while I nursed her baby brother. And, the more we make this normal and accessible, the less barriers that we all will face. So who's watching? Drop a comment. Share with us. Let us know. What does your family do? Oh yeah, and so other, there was a lot of other things too that came into play, particularly with my second baby, because I was really, I'd learned a lot more. So, different things that I incorporated. So one of the most amazing medicines that I added in was just nettles. So they grow here in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things I had learned about as a lactation professional is actually the malunggay from Mary and Amelia from your guys' culture. So malunggay is this really cool superfood that is native to the Philippines. And from what I've gathered, it's used traditionally in the Philippines as part of that line-in period for folks that really gets kind of a bad rap. So that's one of the other things I learned, is that just about every culture has some variation on, the old word, the confinement period, which sounds like a prison. But if we look at it past that word, and I brought this book that I love, and this is not my culture, this is about Chinese tradition. Oh, it's backwards, sorry. The first 40 days talks about how instead of this torture of I see it discussed a lot, the idea of, oh, I could never lay in bed for 40 days. That's not it. It's not about forcing you to lay in bed, but really just centering healing and bonding with your baby. And when we do that, it really supports our breastfeeding and, can really be a strong cultural connection. So that particular book focuses on the author's Chinese heritage. And then what I found in my own heritage was that we have similar traditions. And, I had learned about malunggay, which is also called moringa, and how it's used in the Philippines to, as the birthing person is resting and recuperating, her aunties, her sisters, her fellow birthing people bring her moringa tea, and it's supposed to, fortify her blood. And I learned about it, and it's the American equivalent that grows here in the Pacific Northwest is nettles. And it felt amazing, this nettle tea. And then I also did have some malunggay tea. And as I would drink it, I was like, man, this is amazing. And what's really funny is when I've drank it before, not my favorite flavor, but after birth, man, I couldn't get enough. I was just drinking so much nettle and malunggay tea. And it felt so good. And I could just feel it was really replenishing what my body needed. I just thought that was really cool. And wondering if there's other foods or drinks or traditions that anyone else who's watching, if you guys, found those helpful. But yeah, so, and I definitely did a modified version of the 40-day line-in. The first probably 3 or 4 days, I definitely didn't leave my bedroom much. I mean, I'd get up, I'd go pee, I'd grab a snack. But I had told my whole family, I was like, my job this time is to be with this baby and to let my body heal and to get to know this new human who has joined us. Yes, Mary, it is incredible looking at all of the wisdom in our different cultures and how now, it's like science is great. I love science. Science is wonderful. But, now we're like, science is catching up to our traditional wisdom. And now science is telling us that our traditional wisdom is correct. And it's like, yeah, of course it is. I mean, sure, do a nutritional analysis on nettles and malunggay. It's awesome. And Amelia says, since I didn't know much about breastfeeding, I didn't know they put milk could be used in various ways. Oh, you so learning about the different things that breast milk can do. Yeah, that's always super cool when you're like, hey, what happens if I put breast milk on this? um, yeah, yeah, putting the milk on a gooey eye. So my understanding is, the antibodies in there. Plus, it's like warm um, and comforting. Definitely. I will say the one thing that I have learned um, not to put breast milk on, because uh, there's so many places that it is super good on. Stuffy noses, man. I use it instead of saline spray. So when my babies would get stuffy noses, I would take a little medicine dropper and drop it up their nose and then use the little aspirator um, to suck it out. And that was super awesome. But it will, if you put it on a yeast rash, because it's got all those delicious sugars for baby, it will make the yeast rash worse. So don't do that. But yeah, gooey eyes, up the nose, super great for all of that kind of stuff. But it will feed yeast. So yeah. Um, and then, ooh, a new tradition that I want to start in my family is I saved a bag of milk because my toddler just weaned himself. But I have a bag of milk saved, and I'm going to make some breast milk jewelry out of it. And I'm really looking forward to um, having that, like something to commemorate that journey. I wish I had some of the milk from my daughter's journey because that one was much harder. It'd be pretty cool to have a memento from that. But all I have is the milk from my son. All right. Well, there's 13 people watching. I'd love to hear from some of you all. Let's see who else here. Anyone else have traditions or culturally or in your family that that were helpful or you want to pass on? I guess a more modern tradition that I am passing on in my family is just not well, first of all, I guess just doing it and being very open about it. So I've been aw, thanks, Allegra. Billy Bob. I really appreciate it. But yeah, so just even the talking about it, and that being part of our normalization. So when I grew up, my mom nursed all of us kiddos, but she was the only person I knew who did. I remember, so my middle brother, oh gosh, I hope he doesn't hate me for sharing this. He nursed until he was like 4.5. And I'll admit, I was a total jerk because I was like 14. I was like, oh, that's gross. Yuck. Why are we doing this? And I recognize that was just mainstream culture, right? Telling me that he was the only person I'd ever seen nursing, and he was like 4. And culture told me that was weird because I didn't see it anywhere else. So I think that's also part of the tradition that I'm giving back to my family is, like, I talk about boobs and breastfeeding all the time. There's no way that my kids are going to grow up thinking it's weird. And then hopefully they'll spread that message. But then also, another part that's really important to me is that I try to pass on to my kiddos and to my family and everyone I work with that it's not about avoiding something or that something else is bad. So it's never like, oh, bottle feeding is bad. It's more about here's this is normal, you know, nursing babies is normal, and bottle feeding is normal too. Like, doing all of these things are great. Like, feeding babies is great. And that it shouldn't be, um, you know, that we need to be embracing it all of the different ways. Yes, Mary, absolutely. The act of breastfeeding itself is a new tradition. It's a reclamation, and it's a future. So it's all of those things. Like the same way, when I was giving birth to my baby, that I felt like it was ancient and it was brand new. We are reaching back to our ancestors, and we're reaching forward to our descendants. And that's breastfeeding to me. Like, it's all of those things. It's our ancestors and our descendants. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. And I think let's see, what's the time? Oh, we got a little bit of time, but trying to think if we had any other. I wish that we had Siobhan here. So she's still sick. She's healing, and we, just like we do after childbirth, when someone is sick, we totally support them taking the time they need to heal. And I don't want to speak for other people's communities or cultures, but I would have loved to have had folks from the Black or African American community chiming in. Hopefully, we'll revisit this when we have folks who can represent from that community, because I think that's so important to make sure that we're representing. Because I know, in my culture, in my community, colonization particularly, and the taking babies from their parents played a huge part in the disruption of breastfeeding in our community. So, I mean, how could it not, right? Basically, everyone from my grandmother's generation was, all the kids were removed from their homes and raised in boarding schools, and may or may not have been returned to their families at some point. So we lost all of our parenting tools, and we're doing our best to get them back. But obviously that has also happened in the Black and African American communities, and I don't want to speak for folks from that community, but I know obviously that has caused a huge barrier, because again, when the agency is taken from people, how do we even claim our bodies? How do we we didn't get to feed our babies. So again, that's kind of where I feel like this is so incredibly revolutionary to do this. Like, I feel like this is so important that we take this back. So, all right, well, I guess I will wrap it up. Anyone else have anything to share? Other traditions? Okay, cool. Well, I think this was really beautiful. Thank you all for being here with us. And feel free to add comments, if you're watching later, or if you have a topic that you want to have us tackle next week. So we're going to do this weekly, where we do these lives. And then also, if you have any questions, or, want to do a Q&A, if you're having, any sort of concerns or challenges, we're totally here for this now too. So if you want to type those questions into the chat box, we can answer them. I have a little breastfeeding model doll, which is pretty cool, that I can demonstrate things. I actually don't have her with me here, but since no one has a question, that's fine. But yeah, and maybe next week is the week that we'll have our technology squared away. We did it though, I swear. We practiced, it went really well. It was smooth, it was easy. But yeah, so we'll be back next week. Maybe we'll have our technology figured out. Maybe we'll just go sit in a room together by next week. So, all right. Drop some comments. Let us know what other topics you'd like to hear from us. Otherwise, we'll just keep making them up and telling you what we feel like talking about. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.